Hey guys, it's Amy at Zoe back, and I'm going to do my year-end stats for 2019. So this took me a while to get all my stats together because I have all my numbers, but I still haven't figured out how to make a lot of graphs on Excel. I need to take another class. I learned how to do it at one point, and that knowledge has just drifted away. So this will be a lot of numbers thrown at you if you want to watch this about how I did. Maybe next year I'll be able to do graphs. I want to get this done. So we're just going to go with it. So anyway, so I'm going to talk about my year total stats. So I've done a stats video for every month, talking about how many books I read, what kind of books I read, as in physical, fiction, nonfiction, what kind of, and then ratings I gave. So I'm kind of going through the same list that I always do for every month, but I've tweaked it to be more a bigger list of things to talk about for the year end, because that's when we get to see all the numbers. And as I said, I love stat videos, so sorry mine's going to be so low tech. Anyway, so let's just start. We'll just go through my list. So the first question is always, how many books did I read? So I counted all the books that I read, like including rereads, because most of those rereads I did count in my reading, like as in all my numbers. So they're counted in here as well, and that number will be pulled out at one point. But most of the time, most of these are all reads and rereads, just because that's just the way I did it this year. Anyway, so I read 131 books, which is almost 11 books per month, which is a really great average for me. I would have said I was between 8 and 10, because some months are about 8 and some months are about 12. So it kind of rounds out, but I did really well at 11 books a month. So that's pretty good for me. 75% of that were physical books. So about 99 books were physical, and 19 books were ebooks, and 13 books were audio. So ebooks were about 14.5 and audio was about 10%. So it's a little different from last year. My audiobook and ebook kind of switched. I did a lot more ebooks this year. I read a lot of romance during a romance book bingo this summer. That was all ebooks that I owned or had gotten. So that pushed that number up. I usually don't read that many ebooks, but it is something I should do. But my physical is about normal for me. 75.5% is kind of normal. Around that, 75%. So my ratio of male to female, I have 3 categories. I have male, female, and trans non-binary, because there's only a few books that counted for that. So I had 3 books that were trans, so they're in that category, which is only 2.5% of my reading. But male was 30% and female was 67.5%. So that is skewed towards female this year, way more than it has been in the past. Last year I was closer to the 60-40 kind of thing. So wow, I don't think that's going to happen this year. I think this year I'll be back to more balanced in between, because the books I have on my on the TBRs I put up for this year, plus the series I want to read, are pretty mixed. So we'll see how the percentage goes next year. I thought it was really interesting that I did read more female this year. I mean, I was naturally picking that stuff up, but it just meant I didn't realize the number would be that high. So again, I thought that was pretty good, even though I didn't really try to do that. Again, I always try to do at least 50-50. So it was good that it was skewed towards female. So I always like to see how many books that I own versus how many I got from the library or from a friend. And I read 101 books that I physically or audio or ebook own, I guess is what I would say. So anything that I own. And then 30 books were from the library, and then, 29 books were from the library and 1 book was from my friend. So I didn't borrow any books from my dad this year. I had to go back and look, and I thought I had, but it was at the end of last year. So there's a couple books he has that I want to borrow this year. So there might be a few books in the next year, but it's weird. I didn't borrow any books from my dad this year. I thought he borrowed books from me. Anyway, sorry. I didn't check that on how many books he has in mind, because I've forgotten what he's taken. Anyway, So that was a good percentage. That 77% was reading stuff that I own altogether. And again, that's rereads plus new stuff. So only 23% came from the library or from what I borrowed from somebody. And that's really good. That's a little lower than it was, I think, last year. I definitely took out more books. There was, I said I'll get to that in a second, but I definitely pulled back a little bit from how much I was reading from the library. So that, I thought that was good because I am trying to read more of what I own. I did read 21 mangas or graphic novels. I do not count these in any of my stats except for this one line. Manga and graphic novels are a different subsection of my reading. I don't count those in my reading numbers at all, like on Goodreads. I don't track them that way. They're just, for me, I write down how many I read just so I know that I was reading some, and I did a pretty good, that was higher than last year. Only 2 of them were rereads, so that was pretty good actually, so 19 new things to me. And I'm hoping this year again to keep picking up things to read for that. Which I just remembered I have one I need to read to get back to the library. Anyway, rereads. Okay, so here is, this was a pretty high number for me. I had 29 rereads in the year 2019. So when I counted pages, only 20 of them did I count pages for because they were over two or 3 years in the past that I read them, or much longer. Some of them were 20, was like 10 years. A couple of them were 9, 10 years in the past. So I count pages for those, and they are counted in my read, even though I don't put them on Goodreads. So that's why my number from Goodreads and what I put down as how many I read are off by about 20, because it's wrong. Anyway, so the point is that I did read 29 books. One of them I did not complete, so it's not on the list. Kind of, it's kind of in the numbers of pages at some point, but it's not really. I didn't finish the book anyway. But I read 28 others, and 19 of those I counted. That doesn't make, anyway, don't worry about it. I read quite a bit. And it was technically about 22% of my reading. That's fine. I mean, I don't really dispute that. I do love to reread. I am more apt to pick up a reread when I'm stressed out and stuff. So clearly it shows. 20, yeah, anyway. So DNF. So here is where I start fiddling with numbers. Because I DNF'd 29 books this year. Now, 6 of them I didn't DNF completely. They went back on my shelf, and I will attempt them another time or complete them at another time. I either got distracted, or I just went, this is not the time for this book, or I'm not so sure about this one, and so I put those aside. But the other 23 were books that I DNF'd. Usually between 40 and one I DNF'd at like 360 pages. So the page count that comes from DNFs is 2,801 pages. So I pulled that out for the stats, for the average page per book stat that I'll talk about next. But that just means that I DNF'd on average at 96.6 pages. So it's not that I gave up on these books early. There's a couple that were like 35, 40 pages, but a lot of them I was over 100 pages before I finally went, I cannot read this or I'm done. And so that average is really high for me. 96.6 seems high, but when I went back and looked at my numbers, I had a lot of them that were way over 100 pages before I said, oh, I'm not reading this anymore. But I did DNF 29 books altogether. But again, 6 of them went back on my TBR. The rest of them I got rid of or took back to the library. So average pages per book. So first I'll say on all my spreadsheets I took out the DNF numbers. And so of the books I completed, I read 35,742 pages. So to me that was the highest I'd had in a really long time. but when you average it out to how many books I read, it only comes out to 285 pages per book. And I did read a lot of short novellas and a lot of short romance fiction that they weren't that very long, so that kind of makes sense. I did read a couple of really big books, but it didn't. I was actually surprised I was under 300 for my average. But again, my goal hopefully in the next year will be over 300 for the average, but it's fine. 285 per book. Okay, a little lower than I wanted to be, but it's what it is. And then my percentages between fiction and nonfiction is I read 100, what was I going to say? 100 fiction books and 31 nonfiction books. So fiction was 76.4% and nonfiction was 23.6%. So this is lower than last year. Last year I got up to 34% in nonfiction. This year I did not do as well. I was really hoping for 30%, and I did not meet that goal. And again, it wasn't a goal that I put on my list. It's just in my head, I was thinking I want to be at least 30% nonfiction. So this year I am actually making a conscious effort of trying to get at least 1 or 2 nonfiction in a month. And then not just everything's at nonfiction November, you know, I'm not waiting for that. So I'm already started pretty good this new year, so we're going to see how it goes. But I'm hoping to get that at least 30% or higher next year. I just feel like I need to read more of the nonfiction I own, plus there's so much good stuff out there that I want to learn. So anyway, so I'm going to work on that. But, you know, 76.4% fiction, yeah, a little high. So genres. So I didn't know, again, I would love to do a little graph here. But it was really funny when I put this together. So I'm just going to mention, I do have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 15 categories that I put fiction in for myself. I'm not going to mention them all, but because some of them are really small numbers, but the high numbers were surprising to me. So again, I split certain things up so you'll hear what that is, and then I will do some totals at the bottom. So contemporary fiction, which is not my favorite genre, but I read 17 titles of that. So 13% of my reading was contemporary fiction. But when I look back to see what I'd written down as contemporary fiction, it's almost all my translated works. All the stuff that I read from Japan and South Korea and I think Russia and one other, I can't remember. But and a couple other smattering countries. But the thing that was weird for me because I had to look back and go, well, why did I classify them as contemporary fiction? And they mostly are like nowadays, just in another country and translated from another language. So this is kind of wonky because there was a couple that were written in English first that I did read as well. So there was a few of them, but a majority of those were translated works. So I got to find a different way to pick genres. They are contemporary fiction, though most of them were written in the last, I would say, 20 years. Mostly within the last few years, actually. But I kind of put them there because they were all translated works. I don't know. Maybe I just counted that wrong. But my next highest genre was paranormal romance, which does not surprise me since I read so much of it during the summer for Summer Book Bingo that Sarah at Steeped in Books put on. I read 15 titles for that, and that's 11.4% of my reading. And then the next two are no surprise. Classics and urban fantasy came in at 13 titles each, so that was 10% of my reading for each of those. And then it kind of goes down. All my, actually the next like 3 are all my nonfiction. I split it up as into nonfiction history, which is historical stuff. Then there's memoir, which was a huge thing this year. I read a lot of memoirs. I read 10 titles for that. And general nonfiction, which is kind of the nature and kind of just anything that doesn't fall into memoir and history for me. So, and again, history was 11. So it was 11, 10, and 10. So they're all, 8.4 and 7.6 percentage. So, I mean, it comes out to as I said, they add up to the 23.6%. But when I split them up, I got a lot of titles in there, just still not enough. Anyway, and then again, I have a smattering of science fiction, mystery, historical romance, and then fantasy, and then there's a couple other ones below that are smaller. So if you take, so again, contemporary fiction was high, which I don't think is correct. It's not, I don't want to look at it. I don't read. I mean, it's 13% of what I read, but I think it skews when you look at it that way. So if you take out the fact that I had 5 categories for fantasy, if you add them all together, that's 40 titles, which is 30.5%, which makes much more sense because I read a lot of fantasy in different genres of that. So that makes sense. 30.5% of my reading is fantasy, which I think is right. If you take all the classics, I read 17 titles, so that was 13%, which is, I would say that was what I guessed. It would be about, well, I was hoping 10 to 15, so that's good. I need to work on that, but I still like that number. And then if I put all the romance, different genres of that, it was 22 titles, and that was 16.7%. So I think, I mean, and again, you have to understand that the paranormal romance kind of crossed into 2 of those. But I want to make sure you guys understand that I read mostly fantasy as a high genre. I mean, 30% of my reading was fantasy related. And then, as I said, then it's kind of splits down. But and again, I was kind of worried when I did my numbers this way, but I do split them up first and then we add them back together. Anyway, oh God. Star ratings. So, I had a pretty good year. I had 29 5-star reads for 23.5%. I had 4 stars. I had 66 titles at 53.7%, which is normal for me to be high on the 4s. I am very generous. If I enjoyed it and I think I would reread it in the future, it is a 4 to me. That is kind of the mark of a 4. As long as it's something I really enjoyed and I think I'm going to return and I would reread it again if given the opportunity and had time, then it's a 4. So that's why it's so high. It's over 50%, is because that's when I like something, I like something. Anyway, so, but 3%, I did 23 titles and there was 18.7%, which is a lot lower than last year. Last year I had over 20% that was 3-star reads. So I did so much better this year on that. So also my 2 stars, I only had 4 titles. So that's about only 3.3% were 2-star reads. So that made me feel pretty good. It was pretty low. And I only had 1 star this year. And last year I didn't think I counted anything. I DNF'd most things, but again, we all saw my video about my worst book, Ghost Wall. Anyway, point is, it belongs there at the 1. And that's only, 0.8% of my reading. So really, I read so many good books this year. Now, again, my 5-star reads, a lot of those were rereads. So I can't say that was a great 5-star read, but my 4 stars are almost all new stuff to me and stuff that I would return to. So I think that was a win. Okay, so here we go with the painful one. Let's talk about BookSpot. So, I bought 294 or received 294 books over 2019. Only 48 of those were already read, or I read it during the year. And I had 3 duplicates, which means one time I bought a book that I bought last year and I bought it again and I didn't realize it. I bought another book at 2 different library sales and didn't realize I did that. And then a third book I bought once, got a horrible copy. I mailed it back. I got another copy. I bought it again, but I got the same bad copy. I'm still mad about that. Anyway, so 3 of them are technically duplicates in my numbers. So I pulled those out. So added to my TBR is 143 titles. Lovely. Anyway, so yeah, I didn't do that well. Is that right? No. 243. I was hopeful there for. I'm like, that doesn't make sense with my numbers. No, it's not. I added 243. Yeah. I bought a lot of books onto my TBR. Well, I'll talk about my culling later, but I have some more data on that, but that was just to be the painful to go, I bought too many books last year, and I know it, and I am working on that, so we'll see what happens next year. Audiobooks, I bought 37 audiobooks. Now again, I have a subscription or a membership to Audible, so a lot of times I will I'll wait for the sales, either the daily deals or 2-for-1 deals, or 3-for-2 or whatever, however they do it. And a lot of times that's when I'll bulk up on them. Like right now I have like 3 credits I have not used. I haven't decided what to use them for because I have so many audiobooks that I haven't read. So I did get 37 more. I only listened to 7 of them, which doesn't sound right. I feel like I listened to a lot. Oh, I know. Okay, it's not how many I listened to during the year. It's how many that I bought that I listened to this year. So I put 30 onto kind of my TBR, but some of those are books that I own physically as well, or they're rereads. So I don't know how to count that, but I did read 7 of the ones, listen to 7 of the ones I bought this year. So not a great percentage on that one. Ebooks, I did buy 42 ebooks. Ugh, I only read 8 of them. I need to work on my ebooks. I thought I was cutting back on my ebook purchases. Clearly not. So I did add 34 to my TBR for my Kindle app. So we will have to work on that at some other time. So translated books. So I talked about this a little bit earlier about it's just a little bit higher this year than last year. Most of them were contemporary ones. So I read 18 titles. So again, that's 13.7% of my reading was translated. Some of those were classics too as well, so that's why it's a different number. But overall, that's still pretty good. It's only 13.7. I would really like to hit 15. I'm hoping this year with what classics and some other stuff I want to read that it should be higher. We'll see. But I love translated work, so I'm hoping to hit some stuff that I've picked up in the last year or two that I just haven't read, and some really old ones, like Les Mis, has to happen this year. Yeah. And then I did track authors of color just to see what my percentage was, and I'm pretty disappointed in myself. I only did 24 titles that would qualify as that, so only 18%. 18.3, so I definitely want to up that. I had never tracked that before, and that was an eye-opener, so I will definitely be working on that. Again, due to the fact that I want to read a lot of translated works and I want to read more around the world, I think that would really help. So I'm gonna try to get that number up. I just feel like it should be much higher. So then a couple of the challenges that I did this year, just to give a little end update. I had a top 5 TBR of 80 books that I showed at the end of 2018 for 2019 that I was going to read. So there's 80 titles I wanted to read in the year. They were the top ones I wanted to read. I only read 18 of them, which is 22.5% of the 80. And then I DNF'd 4 of them because I hated them. So that didn't go so well. So that was 5% I hated. And then, so I didn't, so that's, that's 22 books out of 80. And then one of the books I am reading in January. So it doesn't, well, I mean, it's the only one I was currently reading, or I'm currently reading right now. So, but it didn't count for 19. So I didn't do very good on the 80 books I thought I would focus on for 2019. Did not happen. I only, that's only about 27.5%. So this year, again, most of the TBR stuff that I did is much more reduced compared to last year because I don't do well. I'm such a mood reader, and also I'm like everybody goes once, I see a lot of readathons or read-alongs of things, I will change my mind and pick something else up. So I didn't do so good on that. So there are books on that list I still really want to read. I am still going to try to get through a lot of them this year and see if I can check them off and just maybe count how many I get done this next year. We'll find out. I did try to do Reading Through the Ages that Mel at Mel's Bookland Adventure put on with Eve's Alexandria. I failed at that too. I think mostly because a lot of my DNFs this year were historical fiction books. I had a lot of trouble with the books I picked for different prompts. I only read 3 books I would consider historical fiction that went on the bingo board. Yeah, I didn't do so well. But bonus, my friend who is not on BookTube and doesn't watch this stuff, I gave her a copy of the bingo board and she got bingo. So hey, somebody got it. Wasn't me. That's fine. I did do one buddy read this year with Joe Smith, so that was fun, even though the book wasn't great, but hey. And then, like I said, I did a recap of all my goals for 2019 and how I did, and then what I did in 2020, or what I'm going to do in 2020. The only one extra here that I wanted to put in is that I did my total for, so I have one goal that I want to read 50 pages per day on average every month. So for the year, I want that average to pull through, and I did. I got 105.6 pages per day on average for the whole year. To me, that is excellent. I made it over 100 for the whole year. I have never done that. Like, I might have done it once before. Like 2012, I read a lot of books. I don't remember what happened in 2012, but I haven't since then read that many books. And to make this number is my best number for pages on average. So I thought that was really well done. I'm very happy about that. So then let's see here. How do I want to do this? So the last couple stats, just to let's see, maybe I can just fold this and show this to you because this will work. So my countries. So if you look, well, you don't need to see me, right? Yeah. I read way too much from the United States. I read almost 80%, or I read 60% from that. And then the UK was 14.5, and then everything else is kind of small. So I need to work on my, as I said, diversity in just where books come from. I mean, I have a lot of books that I want to read that I already know are from the US and from the UK. I just want to read a lot more diversely. It doesn't surprise me that Japan is number 3 because I read a lot of Japanese fiction. And then number 4 is New Zealand because my favorite author, Nuling Singh, is from New Zealand. But I need to read some other books from other people from there. But anyways, so that's kind of where that's at. And then, I don't know if you guys are going to be able to see this one. But I did, well, I guess maybe you guys won't see that very well. But I did have the year published. And it was very interesting because at first I didn't think I read a lot of books that were written like super soon. But I actually read 16 titles that came out in 2019. I am stunned. That's 12.2% were new releases. I had no idea. That was a lot higher than I thought it would be. My highest number was for 2018, which makes sense because a lot of times a book will stay on my shelf for over a year before I get to it. So 2018, I read 19 titles, which is 14.5% of my reading. So, and then it kind of goes down. 17 was 13 titles for 10%. 2010 to 13 was also 10%. And then 2015 was 12 at, no, that's not, yeah, 12, which is 9.1. And then everything else kind of goes lower, but I did get like 4 in the 90s, 8 in the 80s, because 5 of those books were rereads for David Eddings' Belgariad. And then it's like 2 to, like, it goes down quite a bit. But you can see that I did have a lot of diversity down to 1770, but I have a couple of books here on these. I'm getting better about reading older stuff. My classics, I'm doing better. I don't know if that makes any sense whatsoever on what I just showed you. But I really think I did a really fair job on that. Where is the last? I'm missing one page. Oh, and then just really quickly talking about the Goodreads Stats. It said my shortest book was 41 pages, which was A Dead Djinn in Cairo, which was really good, actually. It was a good alternative history. My longest book was 904 pages, Washington Alive by Ron Chernow. Most popular was 1984 by George Orwell, because we were all reading it. Anyway, least popular was A First Footer for Lady Jane by Jennifer Ashley. And when I saw this, I realized I never told you guys I read that. I read that on New Year's Eve, and I forgot to tell you. Anyway, I'll try to remember to talk about it on my next update. I forgot about that book because it was short too, but it's also newly out in ebook. It was in a collection, and then she released it singly, so that's why it's probably the least popular, because it hasn't been out very long by itself for very long. My average rating on Goodreads was 3.9 stars, which I actually thought it would have been a 4 because I thought I had enough 4s to cross over, but 3.9 makes sense, I guess, because I didn't have that many 3s, but I don't know. Highest rated on that they had listed was Just Mercy by Bryan Stevenson, which totally makes sense because I gave it a 5. And as I said, this was the highest year I read in pages since I started Goodreads in 2010. 2012, I don't know what I was obviously trying to get away from something because I read a lot that year. So I haven't beat that record. But this was the second highest year since then on books and pages. So I'm still pretty happy about that. And it's just I'm still stunned that I got my 100 and over 100 pages per day average, which is just phenomenal. And then the only thing I wanted to show is one last time is my reading in pixels for the whole year, just in case you didn't see it in what was it for my December. So as I said, mostly blues and yellows or greens and yellows, because those are the 50 to 150 pages colors. So I mean, again, I said I have blocks of where I didn't read much, which is the red, but there's a few high days with the dark blue and purple. So, but overall, it was a great year. I am gonna do this again because somebody said I should, so I will. And then, oh, whoops, I flipped the wrong page. And then just to show my buying, just to show how good I did in the beginning, and then I sucked. And then I tried to do better, and then I was kind of not very good. This is my 64, which goes off the chart. You can't even see that because this is 30, like 35, I think. And here's my little 5 from December that I did really well. But that's not going to happen this month because my dad just said we're going to go next Saturday to Powell's, and I have gift cards and Christmas money. So I'm buying books. So, yeah, maybe not the best start to January, but we'll see. So that's all my stats. I hope that made sense. I'm sorry I can't do all the great graphics. Hopefully that made sense. I'm hoping next year that I will get my Excel skills better, that I can actually do that stuff. I know it's easy once you do it, but I cannot remember how. It's been so long since I did it that I can't remember. So anyway, is there any stat you think I should add to this that I need to track this year for next year? Let me know. Did you have any surprises? Because I said I had surprises that I didn't read as much nonfiction as I thought I did. And I definitely thought it was really odd that of my categories, my contemporary fiction was the highest. Although I think that's still skewed because I break up all my fantasy. So anyway, it's really fantasy. Fantasy won for sure. Anyway, so that is it. And okay, let me know what you guys, if you have any stats videos that I haven't seen yet, let me know. And I will see you guys later. Bye.